us back to a safer distance. We can now understand why they were taking those steps. Again, multiple explosions. As I was saying a bit earlier, as we heard them, oftentimes you will hear flashbang grenades when tactical units move into hostage situations like that. That's designed to stun the attacker, clear some space for them to go in and then neutralize the attacker here. We did hear that gunfire. Hard to distinguish from this point whether the gunfire was coming from the outside, the tactical units moving in, or the possibility, of course, Anderson and Chris, from the inside, where we know that the hostage taker holding the hostages inside there, perhaps as many as 6, was heavily armed and is believed to be the same man who killed a female police officer yesterday. So again, this all unfolding just in the last couple of minutes here. About 300, 400 yards away. We believe we're at a safe distance, but the gunfire continued for a bit. It has since stopped, and we're going to be listening for more details as it goes on.
Jim, I'm wondering how many explosions did you hear, and did you hear gunshots before the explosions, or were the explosions first?
Are you guys all
It started, Anderson, with a group of 4 or 5 explosions, then a pause of a couple of minutes. Then we heard gunfire, multiple shots, at least 24 shots. Some of them, I could tell, were not single shots, but that the weapons were on automatic fire, bursts of shots. And then we heard a second round of explosions, 1 or 2 that were smaller. Those first explosions, Anderson, were much bigger. And again, they sounded to me like they were larger explosions than you might hear with a flashbang grenade, which is a typical method used by tactical units as they move in, again, to stun the attacker, get some space. They might even throw smoke grenades to conceal their movement as they come in. You can hear me now. You can hear over my voice now a siren heading closer to the scene. And just throughout this, I'll remind our viewers, there's been a helicopter often over the top, and it's been equipped with a video that allows them to give a live stream from the air of the situation. I just want to say we've been seeing now across the bridge there. There's a bridge going over the highway, and you might be able to see them on camera, dark silhouettes of men, tactical units advancing towards the kosher market. These are the men we saw staging before. Picture them all in black body armor, black ski masks, heavily armed. They were the ones we saw staging before, and just after this gunfire and these explosions, we've seen them streaming across this bridge, going over this highway there, again, towards that kosher market.
All right, thanks, Jim. So what we understand from the sources close to the investigation is that both of these assaults were contemporaneous. They went off at the same time. They obviously used similar deceptive methods. I am being told that the one in Paris, I guess they're meaning there, the marketplace, was a very violent assault. I'm asking for follow-up, who was hurt and how. I'm waiting for that information. And I've just been told it was a cleaner operation at the industrial center, but we're waiting on more details. And obviously why they decided to do them at the same time could be for 100 reasons that don't really matter to us right now. It's all about the outcome, and hopefully that the hostages, certainly in the marketplace, and the woman in the industrial center are all okay.
Right, and we don't know the status of the hostages, both in the supermarket nor in the industrial center. As Chris pointed out, there were as
Paris before we heard the gunfire here, not far apart, but there was a few minutes between them. But I would expect, as Chris is hearing, that they would do these in mindful of the fact that the shooter here had demanded the freedom of the 2 gunmen held northeast of Paris. They would, of course, be concerned that if he were to hear news reports, see something, hear something on his telephone, get a call from a friend or a contact that raid was underway, that he might do something here. It would make sense that those 2 would happen very close to each other, but there was some daylight between them. And again, if I could just add, Anderson and Chris, again in these last few minutes, we continue to see those black silhouettes of the tactical police crossing the bridge there, flooding the zone once again around this hostage standoff at this kosher market here. The tension here incredible. And I'll tell you, the sound of those booms when the explosions first happened here, they were big. They sounded bigger to our ears here than flashbang grenades, and then a number of shots, perhaps 24 shots, automatic gunfire.
Jim we should point out Jim Bitterman just telling me or saying he's gotten a report that civilians have been seen leaving the scene of the store, leaving the scene of the supermarket. And again, we don't know the status of what was believed to be as many as 6 hostages. Atika Schubert is standing by at the industrial park near the Charles de Gaulle airport, where the 2 Kouachi brothers have been holed up. Atika, what?
Nou, papier is...
Uitgebreide tafelen.
No, we can't do that.
Aan het werk zijn voor de...
Vast amounts of police activity on the roads there, Lise.
Yes, you can hear the sirens. Look at the stream of lights going up the hill into Dammartin now. This convoy just snaked behind us. More than a dozen police vans, the sirens blaring, the lights flashing, has gone into the main road, into Dammartin. You can just see the tail end of that convoy now, and security forces are on the streets, leading the main roads, leading up to that area. So another new detail in what seems to be the beginning of the police. Police commandos are connected to the 2 suspects who are holed up there. An emergency helicopter was also seen landing on the premises. We saw the helicopter in the skies overhead. And now, just in the last few minutes, this huge police convoy, which has made its way into Dammartin and should be arriving at the scene of the industrial site where the deadly assault seems to be entering a new phase. This confrontation, a standoff with the 2 suspects who are believed to have a hostage. We know, we've been told by the police that they are armed, and of course they've made it clear in statements that they are prepared to die.
Lise, can I just bring this to our viewers? One source, and I should stress it is just the one source at the moment, suggesting that the suspects near to you have been killed as a result of that assault that you've just been describing. That's one important development. In Paris, again, one source, AFP, saying that several hostages have been freed at that supermarket in Port de Vincennes. Several hostages. They're not putting an exact figure on that, but the suggestion is that some have got out of there, but that the suspects where you are may well, according to one source, have been killed. And certainly, Lise, when you saw the scale of that police operation, we've now also had a government confirmation that that was it. It was the assault to end it. Clearly, there was an absolute determination that this was going to be brought to a close at that moment.
Well, yes, we are getting these reports now. Sorry, we're having a wind situation here on this hill next to Dammartin. The reports are coming in now from French media that the 2 suspects in the Paris shooting have now been killed. That may be why we've seen this convoy of police vehicles heading into the area. We're going to have to wait for confirmation, but yes, those are the latest reports coming in.
And obviously we don't yet know about the fate of the hostage who they were holding.
No details. Earlier in the day, there was conflicting reports about the hostage. The best report, the most detailed report, was that it was an employee of this printworks that is now the scene of the standoff, the police assault now taking place in the industrial area on the edge of Dammartin-en-Gourde. So all we do know is that the person is an employee. It's said to be an employee in a very small company of about 10 people, and that's believed to be the person who is inside. Of course, we don't know alive or dead, given that the explosions and gunfire we've heard in the past half hour.
Lisa, as we talk, I'm just going to take us back, and for the benefit of people who are just joining us, as I'm sure they are, given that events are moving so fast, that's the supermarket in Port de Vincennes in Paris, and these are shots from a few moments ago, I think just prior to some of the events that we've now been describing. And we should hear some sound here in a moment.
Des véhicules de la sécurité civile se sont déplacés. On entend là des coups de feu, il y a des échanges de tirs à l'intérieur, des échanges de tirs nourris, plusieurs explosions, je ne sais pas si vous pouvez les voir. La fusillade est très nourrie. Les hommes du raid sont à l'intérieur. Ils lancent des grenades assourdissantes visiblement. Les véhicules de la sécurité publique, le SAMU ces véhicules viennent de se positionner, ils se rapprochent des lieux, des brancards ont été sortis. De savoir ce qui se passe à l'intérieur, mais on voit du mouvement.
So those were the scenes at the Jewish supermarket within the last 20 minutes, 15 minutes indeed, when that assault took place. And that was only moments after we were showing you scenes from Dammartin, where significant numbers of police officers went into the print works, where the one hostage was being held by the two Charlie Hebdo suspects. A significant operation took place there, of course, and as a result of it, increasingly now a number of reports are telling us that those two suspects were killed in that assault. Originally just the one source said that, and there you can see on the screen at the bottom there a reference to what's happened to the hostages in Paris, where several hostages were, we're told, freed at that supermarket, and that is the scene now live after that assault. You can see the police vehicles, you can see still vast amounts of activity right outside the entrance to that supermarket.
So just as we are entering after many hours of this siege in the small town north of Paris, this very dramatic last half hour where explosions, what seems to be almost a simultaneous assault on both. Gunman was holding hostages, but that assault underway.
It's very clear that the French authorities have decided to act decisively and close down both of these situations at the same time. They cannot have ongoing hostage situations lasting for days, which is what the Indian authorities had in Mumbai. Successful from their point of view. But of course, you know, this is just scratching the surface of a much bigger problem which is stretching right into the roots of French society. But they do seem to have moved very quickly and professionally on this. Situations like this, it isn't necessarily a great benefit for them to have the media. We've got to do our jobs, they're doing theirs, but I'm sure they don't welcome us giving up-to-date reports on everything that's going on, but it's how it is.
Just seeing another agency, the Associated Press, with that quote from a police official that the suspects in the Charlie Hebdo massacre have been killed in Dammartin, a hostage freed. And that is continuing to be, that looks like the picture that is emerging from these very confused situations where for many hours nothing was clear at all.
If that is true, that is the absolute golden goose for any hostage negotiation situation. You know, to be able to eliminate the threat from the gunmen, from the terrorists, from the hostage takers, and being able to free a hostage alive. It very rarely works like that. Sometimes it does. The Iranian embassy siege in 1980 in London more or less happened like that. But very often in hostage situations, particularly when you're dealing with fanatical, ruthless people like these, who we've seen from the amateur video footage, are not, they don't shrink from killing a wounded person in cold blood. It would be amazing if the French had been able to free this hostage alive. I very much doubt that they let him go. It would have taken a bit of marksmanship, possibly a sniper.
Let me just take viewers back to the scenes at Dammartin about 20 minutes ago, because that's what you were seeing a moment ago was in Paris. What you will now see is what happened in Dammartin about 20 minutes ago. Now you saw the initial blast, you've heard the gunfire. I think in a moment, if I recall rightly, that's right, we take you closer to it, and there you can see the extent of the security operation that went on.
Terrorism forces, they train intensively for this, as do many nations, and they've been very heavily involved in this. An operation like this is highly technical. It will involve drones flying above the cloud base, it'll involve electronic signals intelligence, listening in for anything, you're trying to locate exactly where the hostages are, how much ammunition they've got, how tired they're going to be. You're going to be looking at any possible entry points, exit points, where could they escape, etc. It's a very coordinated technical operation, something like this, and it doesn't always go to plan. You know, the simpler the plan, the more chance it has of succeeding.
And Frank, we heard that report that the hostage taker in the kosher supermarket was threatening to kill his hostages if the suspects in Damartin were killed. So that increased the need for this to be done very simultaneously and clinically.
Well, I don't know if you've got it yet on the wires that you've got in front of you. I haven't yet seen what is the status, what is the fate of the hostages in Paris in the supermarket, because what we're hearing
that some were freed.
Some were freed, yeah.
And the report here I'm seeing on Le Monde is that the hostage taker there at the supermarket is dead. That is on Le Monde, being quoted by Reuters news agency. So, I mean, Christian Fraser actually is at the scene. Christian, and what updates do you have from there?
Yeah, well, we heard 5 explosions about 5 or 10 minutes ago, and then we just heard on French reports from Le Monde, as you were saying, that the hostage taker here, Damartin, has been killed. Shortly after those explosions, there were 2 ambulances which came racing past us. We could see paramedics in the back working on somebody. I don't know who that was in the back. We presume it was one of the hostages. And we can now see, in fact, it's quite strange actually, I'm watching through a cafe window here at the line we're at, 2 sieges being wrapped up, and the one we're looking at the supermarket, which is about 500 yards down the road from where we are, shows police swarming around the outside of the supermarket now. So it does appear that that one has been brought to an end too.
And in terms of the hostages, what do we know?
Well, we know that there were at least two women, a woman and child in there, and we understand there were other women in there as well. So at least 5 hostages, gunmen would have liked. But what we didn't hear over the course of the last 5 or 10 minutes was any gunshots, only 5 very loud explosions, and at that point everything went quiet apart from the sirens which were heading towards the area.
Christian, this whole area has been in such a state of lockdown and so many emergency vehicles nearby. Very extraordinary sight for many people to see out their windows.
Well, just so many are on duty at the moment. We've heard from Bernard Cazeneuve, the Interior Minister, that between 80 and 90,000 police from the various police forces there are here in France and the army have been on standby over the last 2 or 3 days. Quite extraordinary this lunchtime. We were reporting from the Place de la République that a lot of police had taken up strategic positions around the city, and they'd unholstered their weapons as well, many of the police who were standing on street corners, as if they were expecting something to happen. Then this event happened in Port de Vincennes. We started to get the early news of it, and right after that, the police issued a poster or some information which showed that they were looking for 2 people in connection with the murder of a policewoman in Montrouge yesterday, and one of those is a woman. The other man is of a North African descent, and we must presume that he was the man that was inside the supermarket. Certainly that is what he told police when he was in there. We heard reports on French media that he said to police, "You know who I am." So we must presume it is the man from Montrouge who was in Montrouge yesterday that was inside the supermarket.
Christian, I'm just going to take viewers to, I think, some new pictures which we've just had coming in from where you are. And you were describing the moments when a blast took place prior to the security assault that you were then describing. I think we can show viewers exactly what happened at that moment.
On entend là des coups de feu, il y a des échanges de tirs à l'intérieur, des échanges de tirs nourris, plusieurs explosions, je ne sais pas si vous pouvez les voir. La fusillade est très nourrie, les hommes du raid sont à l'intérieur, ils ont des grenades assourdissantes visiblement.
And what we then think we are seeing, or will in a moment, is some of the hostages being taken out. I think you can see movement to the right there by the entrance after that explosion had gone off of some people coming out. And certainly if that is the case, that does echo those reports that we were talking about a moment ago that said that several hostages, indeed, I think we are now seeing that for sure, several people being led away. And there you can see in the front there people in white and in blue running away from the scene who managed to get out.
Frank Gardner's still with us, our security correspondent. Frank, what can you deduce from what we see there and hear there about the way this went?
Well, this is a fairly classic hostage release situation where they're using what's called flashbangs. Those grenades, those flashes you saw going off there, they're not typical grenades in the sense that there's no kind of control of it by totally disorientating everybody inside it. And you use the few seconds that you've got before they can recover to get everybody out. They did it in Sydney. They used them there. You know, the Australian police and commandos used it there, and it does seem to have been incredibly effective. If everything is confirmed, within 53 hours of this whole situation kicking off on Wednesday morning, the French have brought both situations under control. They're not out of the woods yet. I'm afraid there probably will be more attempts of things like this, or there will be plots of people trying to do this, but this is certainly the most elaborate plot that France has experienced in a very long time, and if not Europe for that matter.
Frank, one line we're hearing from Damartin with the suspects from the Charlie Hebdo massacre is that AFP are reporting that they came out firing on security forces, one source says.
I mean, I can believe that. I mean, I said very early on with all of this that really the gunmen who attacked Charlie Hebdo, once they got away, they only had really two choices, two courses of action. Either slip out of the country with assumed IDs and try and head to somewhere like Syria or Libya, or go out in a blaze of gunfire and explosion, getting maximum publicity and taking as many of their perceived enemies as they possibly can. And that's exactly what they've done here. I mean, that's no great surprise there, I think.
Frank, do stay with us if you can.
Let's bring in Margaret Gilmore, who's been watching all these events as well from the Royal United Services Institute. What do you make of the events of the last 40 minutes or so?
Well, I think when we heard initially that there were signs of something going on at one of the locations, it did seem unthinkable that the police could move in on one and not the other, because that would jeopardise the state of the hostages in the other. So clearly very coordinated way, and they've managed to pull it off. And I think there must be an assumption here, and we're going to hear the detail eventually, that it was absolutely shoot to kill. These people were ruthless. There was no other option but to send marksmen in at the point, as Frank's described, where they put the flashes and the bangs up and went in to try and bring the hostages out.
Because there were suggestions, weren't there, earlier on this morning, certainly in Damartin, that there'd been at least an attempt made by those who were surrounding the building to make some sort of contact with those inside who were holding this man hostage. But clearly, given what they had done already, there was only a limited amount of success that could be brought about by doing that.
Yes, and also had they established, and again we'll hear in a thing, but had they established whether or not the gunmen had wired the place up, as happened in Madrid several years ago. It sounds to me as if, yes, they do have all this wonderful listening equipment, that they could work out what was going on inside the room. They can get sounds through walls and from a distance and what have you. But it does sound as if the police there had the initiative and that they were possibly not wired up. But we will get the detail as and when.
And just to reconfirm what Karen said a moment ago, AFP now reporting that those two suspects did come out shooting before being killed by security forces storming that building northeast of Paris where they were holed up with a hostage. One police officer reported injured as a result of events there as well. That's according to AFP.
So just to recap, if you're just joining us, what we have seen unfold over the last 45 minutes, simultaneous, it seems, or very coordinated assaults by the security forces on both hostage situations, one unfolding in Damartin-en-Goële, just outside Paris, the other in Paris, in eastern Paris, in Porte de Vincennes, a kosher supermarket where a gunman had taken hostages, where we can join our correspondent Christian Fraser. And Christian, just recap what we've seen happen.
Yes, I'm going to have to listen to you on the phone. It's been rather chaotic today, so we can't establish proper communications. But about 5 or 10 minutes ago, we heard 5 pretty loud explosions coming from the area of the supermarket. It is about, I would say, 500 metres down here, just off to the left-hand side. And you can see the enormous police presence that there is here in Porte de Vincennes. We didn't hear any gunfire. All we heard were the explosions, but we had been closer in from this perimeter, and we'd seen the police moving people back from an area, I would say, around 200 or 300 metres surrounding the supermarket. So it looked as if they were preparing something. And then we saw policemen come to a big tower block as if they were setting up a command position. They were very clear that they wanted to clear a certain area around the supermarket, and they were locking the doors of certain apartment blocks to stop any people, and particularly cameras, going inside. We spoke to one woman who was, she'd been in contact with police, and she'd had a phone call from a family member in New York. And she told us that she'd been in contact with her 37-year-old daughter inside the supermarket, who was pretty distressed, as you can imagine. And she was in there with her boyfriend and her child. They'd been shopping ahead of Sabbath. And she said that... She said, and I'm quoting, that there were more than 2 people killed. She said there were as many as 5 people killed. Now, I don't have any confirmation of that from the Interior Ministry. We'll just have to wait and see what the details are. But we are hearing here at the cordon from police that hostages have been freed. And in the last few minutes, as we were standing here, 2 ambulances came out. And in the back of one of the ambulances...
100.000 moeten halen. Het is, denk ik...
very, very closely as they try to kind of piece together not only the whereabouts of these brothers exactly and the whereabouts of these 2 other suspects over the last 20, also in the weeks and months previous to this. We are learning a lot more, and our Paul Cruikshank, terrorism analyst, is joining us as well. Paul, we do know a lot more now than we did even 24 hours ago about the movements of these 2 brothers, at least, internationally. Movements both to Yemen, and there are reports of recent movements of the younger brother to Syria as well, though we haven't been able to separately confirm that.
That's right, Anderson. I think there's more certainty about the travel to Yemen of one of the brothers that trained with
early on by sources close to that investigation. Separately, there has been a second stand same person, according to police, responsible for shooting 2 police officers and killing one, a female officer, yesterday in a separate attack, separate from Charlie Hebdo. He and his girlfriend. Wound up taking multiple hostages in a kosher grocery nearby the violent. We're hearing that was also satisfactory in its conclusion, but the details there are lighter. That about, Anderson, sums up how we assaults, different sets of hostages. What do you make of it?
Well, not a situation exact like this before, but this is exactly what U.S. counterterrorism officials have warned was in the offing. They've intercepted communications between leaders in Al-Qaeda in Yemen and the Islamic State group in Iraq and Syria, where they've debated how do we capture world attention when counterterrorism officials across the world are able to stop some of these complex 9/11 attacks. So the decision has been go for these smaller attacks that capture media attention, but don't take a lot of skill to carry in about a day. You choose brothers. They have communications with each other because they're family, so that's hard to track. It just means that they fear we're going to see this proliferation of this kind of small-scale attack have really increased their cooperation. There was a real forging of cooperation when the French military went into Mali in around 2013 to attack Al-Qaeda there. U.S. counterterrorism officials, elite U.S. military officials worked with French intelligence to feed them what they needed to attack targets on the ground. Now, that kind of cooperation has continued now between the U.S. and France over the hostages that have been held in Syria, for instance. But what U.S. officials tell me is they've noticed French intelligence seems to have the same issues that the U.S. had pre-9/11. They'll be sitting down with the domestic French intelligence service and then later with the French intelligence service that concentrates on foreign intelligence and realize that the two sides have different sets of information that they don't seem to be sharing with each other. So it's likely that after this incident, there's going to be a lot of looking back among the French security agencies to ask the same kind of things we asked here after 9/11. Who knew what? When did they know it? And was there some sort of a wall that kept information from getting from one agency to another that could have said, hey, these guys are getting close to staging an attack?
Kimberly, what's also of great concern to the United States and to people in the United States, and I think a lot of people don't realize, is the reliance U.S. intelligence has on French intelligence and British intelligence as well. And if French intelligence, which has a very good track record at trying to kind of keep abreast of problems within France, if they are overwhelmed by the sheer volume of potential suspects inside this country, as are British officials as well, that has blowback on U.S. intelligence capabilities as well.
It does indeed, but I have to say U.S. officials I've sat down with have seen this coming. They've talked about the porous borders, the ability of militants to travel very easily from Syria to Turkey to Europe, and you know, there are only so many French intelligence officers.
Kimberly, I got to jump in. Our viewers are looking at live pictures here. Clearly, these are civilians. This is from the supermarket area. These pictures are on a slight delay.
Right. Those are hostages from the grocery. We don't know if everybody got out. We don't know the composition of the hostages, if there were kids for sure. We don't know. But you just saw the reality, a bunch of hostages making it out. We also know people lost their lives there. Was it the terror suspect? Was it his accomplice? Or was it a hostage? That is unknown. We also know that the SWAT members, so there is at least some good news coming out of this situation.
The French ambassador, I'm told, has said that the supermarket was stormed, that the hostage taker is dead, and the hostages are alive. See officers there, and again, these are this is on a tape delay. Officers with guns drawn. You just saw. You can see there, actually, on the top of your screen by the blinking lights.
Right. They definitely seem to be treating someone on the ground there. It seems to be a triage.
Yeah, treating something or getting equipment. I can't tell. Exactly. It looks because somebody just lifted something away from there. They're dealing with something on the ground. It looked like they brought a person out there. Again, we are seeing these images as you are seeing them for the first time. But there seems to be a small group, and Jim Sciutto is joining us as well.
You also see they're still holding, you see the one officer still has weapon raised in the direction of the grocery.
Clearly is somebody on the ground there, right. Off on the left. It looks like some sort of bandage has been put on the person, a white bandage there by the blinking car. You see about 2 or 3 tactical officers dealing with that person. And then in the foreground also, you see at least one officer with a gun drawn, with a rifle drawn.
Right, trained on the entryway of the marketplace. We saw the hostages get out. Again, we still don't know who the 2 dead are. One of them, we're hearing from the ambassador, was the hostage taker. Is this other person his accomplice? Is it a hostage? Is it a SWAT person? We do not know.
And Jim Sciutto, we're also seeing now someone being loaded into an ambulance. Jim, I'm wondering if you're hearing anything from the scene, because all along we were always saying that there was at least one hostage taker. Unclear whether the female accomplice of this hostage taker was also there with him. You're seeing her picture. That picture had been released by French authorities probably about 2 or 3 hours ago. Jim?
Well, Anderson, I think we could say now with some confidence that the situation here has been resolved as well. You have the French ambassador announcing that the terrorist here, as he said, has been neutralized, has been killed, and we, as we've been watching the movements here, have seen a marked change just in the last several minutes. You've seen more of those emergency workers moving closer to the site, a sign that it's safe enough for them to go there, and we've seen more of those tactical units moving away, but still a lot of activity with emergency workers, the sounds of the sirens of ambulances moving in, and many of them rushing away from here, as we've seen in those other pictures, signs of images of people being treated at the scene. And this seems to make sense to us, because after we heard those initial rounds of gunfire and explosions, a second round of gunfire a few moments later, very quickly we saw ambulances moving in, responding to something on the ground. And it is then when those pictures you were just showing our viewers a few minutes ago, when those pictures were shot, showing someone being treated on the ground. That's the sad news. The good news, based on what the French ambassador is saying, but also a change in the tenor of things here on the scene. The moving in and the freer movement of emergency workers around the sides and the scene of this kosher market, and the moving away of those tactical units. It looks like this hostage standoff has been resolved as well.
And that's certainly the good news. Indeed, a lot of details still yet to be learned. We're getting those images from French television, which you're seeing there.
Right, and again, just to kind of bring you up to date, right now you're looking at a slightly delayed video that we're getting from our friends on French television. In the back of the picture, by the blinking lights of that small vehicle, there was someone who was being treated there. They've since been moved. You're watching that group of men move them. You're looking at the hostages that were released from the grocery store. This happened. Was it all of them? Were any injured? We don't know the details yet, but certainly many of them made it out okay. We're also being told, as you see on your screen, 3 hostage takers dead. That calculus, as far as we know at this point, are the 2 brothers who were taken out in a separate assault, in a separate standoff in an industrial area, and the African-American man who had been pictured as a suspect in a separate shooting yesterday.
Not American, the man of African descent.
Right, African descent, thank you. Right. Sorry, Anderson. And who was the other person who was killed? We don't know. We also know that there have been injuries to authorities, to the SWAT members. We don't know the extent of them, but we did see in another piece of this video someone that appeared to be a SWAT member being triaged by some of his own. Right. So we don't know the extent of the injuries.
Obviously, and as you pointed out, and your sourcing on this has been very accurate all throughout this. the operation, obviously, in the supermarket, a lot more complex than the operation in the industrial park. The operation in the supermarket involving multiple hostages and as well as at least one hostage taker. We don't know if there were any more. There is this female suspect. We do not know whether or not she was involved in the hostage-taking incident. The operation with the two Kouachi brothers, it was believed there was simply one hostage. That hostage has been freed, according to the local mayor. But again, there you see from moments ago, hostages running out under the protection of tactical units.
Right, so that was the good news. Did all of the hostages make it out? That we don't know. We're waiting to learn. Simultaneously, as this was going on, there is a separate, not operation, but there's a movement of assets into the area with spread of what we've been loosely calling a cell could be. Could there be another wave of attack as a result of this? And it's not hysteria. It's based on their reasoning that what they think happened here was that in this space of time since the shooting where the woman police officer was killed, that man and his girlfriend, who were identified by authorities as the suspects, had an ability to flee. They were off the radar. They came back, the authorities believe, and their reckoning is at this point maybe they came back because of what was happening with the brothers, and if so, might someone else try to take up action because of what went on with those two terrorists. So they are also taking action in that area right now.
And importantly, the police union spokesperson has just said that the female suspect is still on the loose. The female suspect whose image we have been showing for the last several hours, that she is still on the loose. That is her picture. Obviously, law enforcement released her picture because they wanted people to be on the lookout for this woman who was last seen in the city of Paris, believed to be a suspect in the shooting death of the female police officer Thursday morning, as well as the wounding of another police officer in that same incident Thursday morning. The male suspect who took part in that shooting, according to police, he is now dead in that shooting in the hostage-taking incident at the supermarket. But that female suspect, and that's an important point because the question is, are there others who are involved in this cell who could aid her? Are there others that she is in communication with? All of these points are things that investigators are looking very closely at, trying to gather as much information as they can about the whereabouts of these people, not only in the last 24 hours, but in the last weeks and even years, frankly.
The information on what happened in the grocery store is much less developed than what happened in the industrial park. How many hostages made it out? Was it all? Was it something less than that? On your picture right now, you're seeing what appears to be one of the SWAT members being treated by members of his own. Is that the only injury? A lot of the information there is soft. I know we're hearing from an official that that hostage taker, the man of African descent who is connected to the magazine terrorists, that he was killed.
In this hostage-taking and had seen at least one wounded person being taken away by ambulance. There had been reports that two hostages had been killed early on. We do not know whether or not those were the only hostages killed, whether in fact the two is the correct number.
We've been staying away from numbers on that because obviously that's the last thing we wanted to be true in this situation. But it has wound up being accurate that hostages didn't make it out of there alive. The information is still soft. It was a very violent assault inside. SWAT team members were hurt and hostages lost their lives. Obviously, according to the French media, but the details are still soft there.
Yeah, that hostage incident. And again, if you are just joining us, it's a good time, as Chris said, to reset. It's just a little bit after noon in the United States, on the east coast of the United States. Just after 6 p.m. here, darkness has now come. The two hostage standoffs, which we have been broadcasting about for the last 4 or 5 hours, they are both over. The three hostage takers dead. The two Kouachi brothers, Saeed Kouachi and Sharif Kouachi, 34 years old and 32-year-old, they have been killed. The hostage that they had taken in their final final assault, in their final terrorist incident, that hostage has been freed and apparently is unharmed, is okay. The hostage taker in the kosher supermarket, who'd been holding a kosher supermarket with what was said to be at least 6 hostages, that hostage taker is also dead. We're told that some hostages have lost their lives. Unclear whether it was just hostages early on in the initial invasion by this gunman, by this terrorist, into the supermarket, whether that is when some individuals were killed, or if it was in the actual the final assault by tactical units. There you're seeing some movement by French police, by paramedics as well.
And we also know that members of the French authorities, the task force that went in there and did that assault, they took injuries as well. We saw at least one of them being triaged, treated by their own outside the grocery store in the immediate aftermath as the hostages were being taken to safety.
Yeah, there is still so much to learn about this cell. It now appears, I mean, I think logic dictates that this man of African descent, who you see, whose pictures we've been showing, it would seem to be that he was part of the Charlie Hebdo attack. We cannot say that for sure, though. We simply do not know.
Authorities will only say they know he was connected somehow to the brothers. Was he involved in the magazine? That they have not said. They don't know, but certainly there was a connection.
And connected for a long period of time. We know that early on they were actually part of a sports team, a sports club together. They lived in the same area. There had been also an attempt to free an Algerian prisoner back in, I don't want to get the year wrong, an attempt by a cell to free an Algerian prisoner. The Kouachi brothers were suspects in that. At least one of them was. They were never brought up on charges on that because there wasn't. French authorities believe there wasn't enough. Evidence. Third gunman is also believed to have been involved in that. But again, whether or not exactly their level of operational cooperation, we don't know.
And French authorities are also moving on that neighborhood. They've removed assets from these two areas to see if there is going to be any shadow activity there. Will there be a follow-up or any type of move of vengeance because of what happened to the brothers or the third terrorist suspect from that neighborhood where they all were? And again, we're using the word cell loosely, but certainly these 3 men had an affiliation, and the logical extension, as you said, Anderson, is there may be more who are sympathetic to their cause, if not connected.